and answers until the end of the session. And as I mentioned before, okay, they will display the links. We also have a virtual participation from around the world. So I request you to invite your colleagues and all those you feel should be part of the forum onto the Zoom platform. It's still possible for them to join. Please pass on the Zoom details displayed. They also can still be part of the forum. Then we have social media being an essential part of advocacy work. We encourage you to post about the conference on your social media handles. We also have some art installations outside. This is handmade by the Project WFAD team. And there are some real stories of children that resonate universally with children across the globe, displayed across the corridors. So please take time during your breaks to, take some pictures with them and post them on your handles with a conference hashtag. Did you display the hashtag also? Can you display that once more? The conference hashtag, tagging your colleagues and organizations that work with children back home. So we have all that information. If you take a quick picture, you'll get it all. And for medical emergencies and any assistance or inquiries, we have, as Dinah mentioned before, a dedicated forum help desk right next to the registration counters. Please approach them for all your queries and requests. And on the third day of the forum, please complete your checkout formalities during the morning tea break. We will make arrangements for the safekeeping of your luggage. We will, and those who have a later flight or train, you can extend your stay with the hotel directly. Kindly approach the hotel friend desk to facilitate that. You should do that at the earliest if you still haven't done it. I kindly request the participants to wear your conference name tag throughout the forum, and wishing you all a comfortable stay and a fruitful participation in Children Matter International Forum. And as Dinah mentioned before, the official inaugural ceremony of the forum will be in the afternoon. And the table number 1, that is where the speakers can approach during your break, before your sessions, to give your PT or pen drive, or you can also give it your presentations to the communication team so that we can ensure a glitch-free presentation. So now we are going to dive right into day 1. For that, I invite Mr. Raja Shanmugam from the Board of Advisors, Fourth Way Foundation, to set the tone of the forum. Mr. Raja Shanmugam was co-founder, president, and chief people officer of Happiest Mind Technologies. He was also the founding CEO of Mindtree Foundation. After 30 years in the IT industry with stints in Wipro, Mindtree, and Happiest Minds, Mr. Raja now invests his time in making the lives of people in his local community a little easier to live through pastoral counseling sessions for young adults, parents, and student counselors and teachers in a local community college for underprivileged children. Over to you, Raja.
Thank you, Shalini. Good morning. When we had the first session, I remember Rajgiri College, the government of Kerala had announced a holiday on that day because it was going to rain. We were worried, but then the weather held up and we had a great conference. Last night when I saw the rain all around, I was wondering what's going to happen. But again, today, the heavens have held up. It's a good sign. Thank you. It feels great to be back in person, to meet, to shake hands, to say hello, to smile, instead of that 14-inch Zoom screens we were all using for the last 2 years. So great to see you all here. Thank you. I am also grateful to a few of our, I would say, mentors or guides or advisors. We have Esbjörn, we have Amy, we have Regina, we have Billy, we have Marco. think he's going to be here on Friday, right? Swaroop is going to be here evening. Is he on holiday? Okay. Hi, Swaroop. And Vasanti couldn't be here. Without their support, without their push, we wouldn't be here having this conference. Diana and Cece asked me to set the tone, set the context for this conference. I said, isn't it self-evident? Isn't it staring in your face? Why do we need to set a separate context and tone for this conference? Then I was listening to this, or viewing this video from Vancouver. I was listening to these videos of children, of youth in Kerala, going through these issues. Then I was reminded of this prayer from St. Francis Drake. Disturb us, Lord. When we are too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we have dreamed too little. Disturb us, Lord, when we arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture onto wilder seas, where storms will show your majesty, where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push back the future in strength, courage, and love. Like that prayer of St. Francis Drake, I invite you all in this conference to be disturbed and to disturb. Make no mistake, we have accomplished a lot in the last 5 years. So much that's happening, including the month-long awareness session that was sponsored by the government of Kerala specifically on this drug thing. Quite a lot of progress has been made, but unfortunately the challenges are moving faster than us. Over the next 3 days, I invite all to be prepared to be disturbed and learn from those who have ventured into stormy seas and have lost sight of the land and have found the stars. I invite you all to be disturbed enough to lose sight of the land yourself and commit yourself to this journey of making this world a safer place for children. Let the experiences we share, the frustrations we voice, the ideas we exchange, the fears we articulate, combine to become the wind behind our sails. Because we must journey through the storms of official apathy, the storms of corporate greed and uncaring, the storms of criminal networks, the storms of misinformation and misdirection, the storms of despondency due to societal breakdowns, joblessness, and bleak economic features. Staying unaffected, safe, and close to the shore in our own comfort zones is not an option. Through the next few days, we will get to know in enormous detail the extent of growing challenges we are facing and we will face in keeping our children safe from abusing substances. We'll possibly get some answers like the question that my colleague Ashwin asked. Where do we stand as India compared to the world? I don't know. We will know possibly at the end of 3 days. The risks, the enticements, the traps, the Trojan horses, the marketing, the policy directions, which will all make our efforts more and more challenging. We will hear this over and over from different perspectives, from our own backyard in Kerala, from other countries, and from a global perspective. We will also hear stories of hope, of successes, of the stars visible through the storms, of best practices, of heroes who do not wear capes, who do not fly through the sky in fancy spandex uniforms, but who work on the ground, get their hands dirty, risk their lives and reputations, saving one child at a time, pushing back one threat at a time. Let this be the beginning of the next phase of our journey, renewed by our faith, strengthened by our commitment, energized by our cooperation, and armed with our ideas. Let every step we take, every action we execute, every day of our lives be to make this world a bit safer for our children. And not just that, I think we need to pool our efforts to scale enormously. We need to turbocharge our actions and gain pace, which is an order of magnitude than what we are doing today. I'm hopeful we'll find out how we can do all this by the end of 18th. I hesitate to say Friday, because the only person who got anything accomplished by Friday was Robinson Crusoe. So, to close, disturb us, Lord, disturb us. For the sake of our children, for the sake of our children's children. Thank you.
An expert in designing customized training programs, his ability to identify, motivate, and bring out the best in people has earned him immense recognition in the learning and development industry. Having traveled across the world, Mr. Joseph has exposure to different cultures, communities, and initiatives that have helped him build practical, people-based development programs that focus on
Good morning. Please give me 1 minute to set my laptop. technological revolution. And we at Fourth Wave, when we started this organization around 22 years back, we sat back and we realized that all these three waves happen outside an individual. So we believe that we are starting the fourth wave, which is happening within an individual that will help him, her, to use the other three waves more fruitfully. So in that context, we started fourth wave. Second question that we were asked is, why these particular dates? Because actually there is an importance to these days. Any clue what that could be? This is actually between two important Children's Day. Okay, November 14th is Children's Day for India, and 20th is the Children's Day for the world. And we believe that a discussion on children should happen during this time. Technically speaking, this is not a good time to have conferences because hotel rates are over the roof. Okay, this is holiday time, but we thought children matter, and if children matter, then we need to spend because we believe in the future of our children. So I'll just want you to watch a small video which our team had put together for this conference in the context of Children's Day. David, audio from the laptop, please. The next question we were asked is, why this venue? Okay, why not a lot of other venues? Why this venue is our patron, Mr. Shibulan and Kumari Shibulal. They have a connection with this venue. You will come to know a little bit later. So they graciously offered to host us. That is why we are having the conference at this venue. You will meet both of them in the span of the next 3 days. So for a few moments, I want you to learn a new word. I'm sure those who had come for the last conference, you know, but those who have coming for the first time from outside, I'm sure you can't read what is there, right? It is written in Malayalam, and the word is Venda. Can we say that together? Venda. So you have learned a new language now, okay? Venda means no in our language of Kerala. So Project Venda, I'll talk about Project Venda in the afternoon, but what is going to happen in the next few days? Okay? First and foremost, you will be listening to almost 50 people speaking. There will be 50 speakers from various countries speaking, and the intention of them speaking over here is not for them to give you an idea of everything that they do, because in the short span of time that is given to each speaker, they will not be able to tell everything. The idea is they give you an advertisement of what they do, and you catch them during the breaks and find out more. Okay, so that is the main intent of, otherwise all of you sitting in this hall have done so many years of work. How can you compress that into 15 minutes or 10 minutes? It's almost impossible. So the idea is that you give an advertisement and the others will catch hold of you and learn from your model. To give you some data, we have over 50 countries participating, which is online and right here over here. And we had got an overwhelming response from the media too. We have not counted today's articles, but we have got 45 sightings till now in various newspapers, and once the conference begins, I believe the sightings in the news media will increase, because media is also watching us very closely, because we are claiming certain things. Though Raja mentioned, I want to shout out a few names over here. Raja, Ashwin, Sorup, three of our advisory board members who are over here today. They will be with us for the next 3 days, and Bala will join us. Also, two very important person who has helped us. One is Mr. Johnson. He was very instrumental in helping us in the 2019 conference, and for this conference also. Yesterday when I was talking to him is when we realized that technically today he was supposed to have an operation which he postponed. He postponed his surgery for this conference. So thank you, Johnson sir. And Mr. Sijo, I don't know where you are, but if you can just lift your hand. Sijo is from the Social Justice Department. Thank you, Sijo sir, for coming and supporting us. Just 2 minutes to maybe quickly brief on what Project Venda has done over the years. It's in a visual format, so please watch. Some of the visuals are a bit fast because we don't want to prolong. This will be available on YouTube if you want to go back and do a detailed study on what has happened. So spend a few moments watching, please. Participating in the conference that was discussed by the members of parliament in India. Another very important feature I want to bring forth is, Shalini had spoken about, but want to bring forth is, for us, one of the key stakeholders are young people. So over the next 3 days, you will have 50 youngsters from 20 different schools and universities being trained. And on the last day, you will have youngsters from 150 educational institutions in Kerala joining us. The team in the last few months have been liaising with almost 250 universities or colleges. So out of that 150 will be coming over here, because we somehow believe that youth play a very important role in what we are discussing. We will have key government departments also coming, from the Narcotics Control Bureau to the excise, to the police, to the cybercrime, to customs, to women and child, to the social justice, to education, and you'll see many of them coming over here. Just to bring everything in context, I would like you to take this piece of paper that is there on the table. It might be under the maybe glass with chocolate. So if all of you can have one piece, it will be in different colors, okay? Don't look for only this color. It might be in different colors on your table. I would like you to take one piece and write your name on that, please. Just write your name on that. Yeah. And fold it into 4 with your name inside. Okay, fold it into 4. Now, can all of you stand for a moment? I know we all want to sit down and listen, but just stand for a moment, please. Good, especially tables where there are lesser number of people, if you can just combine for 2 minutes. Okay, don't take anything other than this piece of paper. Okay, you can come back to your tables after this activity, but just where there are, let's say, 6 or 7 people, it's okay. But if there are less number of people, just move. The folded piece of paper, I want all of you to put it in the center of the table, please. On the table, okay, on the table. And if someone in the team can shuffle it out, it would be nice. We're not playing cards and all, okay, but just someone can just shuffle that piece of paper. Done? Now listen to my instruction very carefully. You have to pick your name, okay? Now if you get somebody else's name, you have to put that piece of paper back on the table, fold and put it back. So you keep picking till you get your name. If somebody else's is there, you have to fold and keep it back. Your job is to get your own name. Go ahead. Let's see which table wins. If it is not yours, put it back, please. Good. Wonderful. Now I'll make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, fold and keep it back. Even if you have not got, don't worry, just fold and keep it back. Okay, this time, whichever sheet you pick, whoever name comes on that sheet, give the sheet to that person. So if I am on the table and you get Joseph, you give the paper to me. Okay, you don't put it back on the table. Okay. Go ahead, pick one piece, and whosoever it belongs, just give it to that person. If it is yours, wonderful. And if you have given to the person, the table can sit down, where we will know that, okay, you have finished. Can you sit down, please? Actually, we go on multiplying the table, okay? But the organizing team will get hold of my throat if I do that, because we were running short of time. On a small table, it is easy, but when the number of people increase, finding your own name becomes difficult. But finding someone's name and giving it to that person becomes very, very easy. And I believe that is what all of you are doing over here. Most of you are actually working for others. You're working for people, you're working for children, you're working for others, and that is why maybe you are more happy than a lot of other people. I'm not saying others are not happy, but it's nice to see a lot of smiles on your faces. You can do this at, maybe when we do have the youngsters here, we will have everyone throwing the piece of paper in the center of the hall and then picking it up. It's almost impossible to get your name, but there is a possibility if you find or pass it on to someone else. Okay. And just to end this time, I want to play the logo animation again, because the team was behind it for a few, they tried their best and they have come up with something which is interesting. So we'll watch this and then we will wind. Meet at least 50 different speakers, but you will also have a lot of surprises like what you had this morning. Okay, I'm sure some of your eardrums are still beating from the noise that you heard. So you will see various traditional items or various traditional forms of art and of Kerala over here. Above all, what we always tell people who come for a conference is have fun, meet people, eat well, learn well, because you have a long run or a long race to run when you're back in your country. So maybe many of you might not even be able to rest when you're back home, or some of you find it well. So have fun, relax, enjoy. Because we live in a very complicated world, okay, and I tell this to the young people. We have fat people who want to become thin, and thin people who want to become fat. You have tall people who want to become short, and short people who want to become tall. You have fair people sitting in the sun to become dark, and dark people putting all possible creams to become fair. You have people who have glasses who want to throw away the glasses, and people who don't have glasses want to wear glasses. You have people who have hair, shave it off, and people who don't have hair want hair to come. You have it in countries where they don't have clothes, they want to wear clothes, and in countries where they have plenty of clothes, they throw away the clothes that they have.
Global multilateral community of over 355 non-governmental organizations and 480 individuals. WFAD aims to strengthen prevention, increase access to treatment, and promote recovery, and strongly includes a focus on women and children in its activities. The Constitution of WFAD adheres to Article 33 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child to protect them from illicit drug use. I invite Ms. Amy Ronshausen, International President, WFAD USA, to give the keynote address. Amy Ronshausen is the Executive Director of both Drug Free America Foundation and Save Our Society from Drugs. Analyzed and tracked state and federal drug policy legislation and trained prevention professionals at local, national, and international conferences. In 2019, Amy was elected as the International President of World Federation Against Drugs. Over to you, Ms. Amy.
only seen in emails or in small little boxes on my screens at home. So I'm so happy to be here and so glad to see all of you this morning. Before I start, I just want to really thank the Fourth Wave Foundation for everything that they've done. I know how hard it is to put together these conferences, and so much work goes into it. If we could just give them a round of applause for everything. And thank you so much for your very warm welcome to my very first trip, hopefully not last trip to India. I'm so happy to be here. So I have been tasked with the monumental duty of talking about the world drug problem and the future of children, which really is probably what this 3-day conference is about, but I'm going to sum it up in 15 minutes, maybe. So let's see if I can. All right. So according to the latest World Drug Report produced by UNODC, there are an estimated 284 million people worldwide aged 15 to 64 who had used a drug within the last 12 months. This corresponds to approximately 1 in type drugs. Polydrug use is different all around the world. For example, in the Americas, the most common combination of drugs are cannabis and cocaine, opioids and stimulants, hallucinogens and sedatives or tranquilizers, and cannabis, all frequently combined with alcohol. In Asia, the more common combinations are heroin with triazolone, midazolam, or zypicolone, I'm probably pronouncing some of these wrong, methadone or morphine with heroin or opium, opiates and cannabis, methamphetamine or captagon with benzodiazepines, and this is with or without cannabis, methamphetamines, and ketamine. As much as drug use differs regionally, it also differs between sex and age. Men are more likely than women to use most drugs, and young people are more likely to use any drugs. This holds true for most regions and most drug types. For example, according to the most recent data available from household surveys in more than 64 countries, less than a third of people who use cannabis or cocaine worldwide are women. Women exhibit similar prevalence for some substance groups, and in those they can outnumber men. This is often true for the non-medical use of pharmaceutical drugs, particularly opioids and sedatives and tranquilizers. Women represent more than 40% of people who use methamphetamine and engage in the non-medical use of stimulants, opioids and sedatives, and tranquilizers in countries where the data is available. Adolescents in some regions of the world are now more experienced in drug use than past generations. In fact, their level of use is higher than the lifetime experience of previous generations. Survey data across all regions show a higher prevalence of cannabis use in the past year among adolescents than in the entire population aged 15 to 64. When asked the reasons why youth list for using drugs, they include that it makes them feel good, it helps them reduce stress, their friends are using, and it helps them to get to sleep. As prevention professionals, or even as just adults who interact with the youth in our lives, it's important that we understand these reasons so that we can build protective factors to counter them. We know that any level of drug use can be harmful. Later, you will hear from Regina, who will discuss Article 33 and the rights of the child. And we are here under the heading of Children Matter. Every child deserves to grow up in an environment free from the impact of drugs. It is important to understand the consequences
of substance abuse on a child who doesn't have a choice. Parental substance use has a major impact on the well-being of children. It is estimated that 1 in 8 children in the United States alone, that's 8.7 million children, live with at least one parent who abuses alcohol. Parents with substance use problems are less likely to effectively function in that parental role. This is due to the constant physical and mental impairment caused by alcohol and drugs, the difficulties with regulating emotions and controlling anger and impulsivity, the lack of household resources stemming from the habitual spending on drugs and alcohol, and the amount of time spent away from their children, either during incarceration or while they're seeking out, manufacturing, or using alcohol and drugs. Educational problems are also a characteristic of some children who are affected by parental substance abuse. Problems with unexpected absences in childhood can turn into more seriously truant problems in school. In early childhood, parents read less and provide less learning-based stimulation to their infants and toddlers. In school-aged years, parents could be less available to provide assistance with homework, monitoring school performance, and tracking assignments. These children may have difficulties with attention concentration due to increased anxieties at home related to their parents' substance use. Unstructured bedtimes, meal times, as well as witnessing domestic violence and safety issues all contribute to an increasing learning problems and behavioral problems at school. It is difficult for children to focus on high-order thinking and learning when basic survival skills aren't being met. Similar to the home environment, communication between substance-abusing parents and teachers at the larger school system is poor. Parental substance use is recognized as a risk factor for various forms of child abuse, including physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. A parent with a substance use disorder is 3 times more likely to physically or sexually abuse their child. Children of parents with a substance use disorder are at a greater risk for abuse and neglect, and childhood abuse can have devastating impact throughout their lives. These children are more likely to experience trauma, face difficulties with concentration and learning, control their physical and emotional responses to stress, and form trusting relationships. Several epidemiological studies have shown that experiencing abuse as a child increases the risk for substance abuse later in life. So when we look at this chart that was published by the most recent World Drug Report showing the different measures of harm for substance abuse, let's not only look at how it impacts these individuals, let's look at how these measures impact the youth that are undoubtedly tied in some way or another to each one of these individuals, whether it be a sibling, a parent, a niece, nephew, or just a friend, and it might even be the youth themselves. It might be easier to understand the impact of addiction or even the impact of a drug-related death, but let's not forget the impact that treatment puts on a family as well. So even when there is the good news of a parent seeking treatment, that process also has a significant impact on the child, because there's many treatment settings that aren't geared toward parents, or especially geared toward women, or even more so, women with children. So what can we do? What are we doing? There's a lot. We can support local children and family centers. These groups often offer a safe environment and support care to children whose parents who are unable to. We can promote evidence-based prevention programs. Preventative education at a young age continues to be an effective way to keep kids off drugs. We can build and strengthen protective factors. We can listen and have conversations, and not just a conversation that's awkward and might happen at a 45-minute setting where we've pulled that youngster aside to have this really odd conversation about not using drugs, but simple 30-second conversations throughout the day or throughout the week, and asking them what they think and how are they addressing these issues? We can also set an example. I know it sounds artificial sometimes, but youth look at what we do as adults. As very small children, they mimic us, but as they grow older, they still do that because they've seen the way that we have acted in situations, and they do the same. So over the next couple of days, you will hear strategies on how to work with the youth population, and we will hear from youth themselves. I hope that you will have conversations with other attendees and the subject matter experts on the agenda. The total responsibility of being drug-free cannot lay at the feet of our youth. As adults, it is our responsibility to provide an environment and build a community that advocates at the local and the global level that children do matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has been helping make the world safer from drugs, organized crime, corruption, and terrorism. UNODC is committed to achieving health, security, and justice for all by tackling these threats and promoting peace and sustainable well-being. Representing the Director General of the United Nations Office at Vienna and United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Ms. Gadi Fativali, we have with us the Regional Representative for South Asia of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Mr. Teixiera. A Portuguese national, Mr. Teixiera joined the UNODC in 2011 in the Corruption and Economic Crime Branch Division for Treaty Affairs, and in January 2019 as the Senior Program Officer and Coordinator of the Global Program for the Implementation of Doha Declaration, aimed at helping countries achieve a positive and sustainable impact on criminal justice, corruption prevention, and the rule of law. He leads a team of dedicated professionals both in Vienna and in the field, responsible for providing technical assistance and disseminating materials and tools related to education, youth crime prevention through sports, judicial integrity, and the rehabilitation of prisoners. Over to you, Mr. Markuta.
Yes, it's here. So good morning to all. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation, distinguished delegates, dear participants, and of course, my dear friends from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. It is, for me, a memorable day, not only for being represented as Executive Director, but by two other reasons that I want to share with you. The first reason is the topic. Naturally, the topic and children matters is a key element of UNODC mandate, so this is the first reason. The second reason, I would say more selfish, is because this is my first official travel as a new representative for South Asia. So in that context, I would like to express, obviously, to the World Federation Against Drugs a special thanks, also for the First Way Foundation, and now
I learned also a new word to Project Venda. So thank you to you. It's because of you that I'm here. The second element is, of course, going through more substantive details. What I will try to do under the minutes that was allotted is going through, continue to set the stage. We heard Dr. Amy, she put, I would say, some elements of the World Drug Report, why they are important to set the stage here. And in the principle of sharing, I will put also a few reflections further. As you know, we are a specialized agency of the United Nations Secretariat with a main focus on crime prevention to help the member states and different actors to address the world drug problem, work on the good governance, assisting rule of law under the package of the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, drug use, illicit trafficking are cornerstones of our mandate and our work, and also part of our priorities in the region. As you see in the slide, this is what I do now. Basically, as the regional representative, this is the countries that I cover. And of course, besides having the global coverage, we have, and I have a specific responsibility of South Asia. A few metrics you heard in the previous presentation, but I want also to highlight them because I do think they are important for us to understand what we are here and how important it is what we intend to do in the next 3 days. First of all, the last World Report mentioned that 61 million people use opioids in 2020, representing 1.2 of the global population. I think this is a metric by itself that reveals the magnitude and the scale of the program. The second part, which is also for me very important, is from those numbers, do you know that half of them will reside in South Asia or Southwest Asia? So that reveals that we are in epicenter of the problem of opioids consumption. And overall, this is also only overpassed by North America. And I'm glad that I see also participants in here in terms of percentage of use. Also, I want to mention that both India and China has reported significant seizures of fentanyl. And also the number of people on treatment for using methamphetamine disorders in Bangladesh between 2016 2019 double. Also, I want also to mention that the opioids use are obviously and continue to be a major concern about consumption, and as you see, only surpassed by cannabis. The theme of this discussion and discussions now is that children matter. They do have a right to have a drug-free childhood, and from our perspective, and I think all of us, without that, a drug-free childhood is critical for a free society, for which, in turn, will allow us to rebuild a better, safer, and obviously a healthier world. In that context, South Asia and India are special because the region is powered by a strong demographic. Also, India has a tremendous achievements in terms of social and economical development, but also the risk of having a very significant population that is also more vulnerable, as you saw, Amy, in your presentation, to obviously drug abuse disorders. However, in our perspective, drug use and addiction, especially among young people, remain a huge impediment that prevents this region from achieving its true potential and ensuring that no one is left behind, especially children and youth. Drug challenges is growing, and so much our response needs also to progressively continue to grow. India was among the most frequently mentioned countries in the shipments of synthetic stimulants on the darknet markets. We have heard also in the opening statements the level of digitalization, the access to obviously the internet, and this is also used for not only illicit trafficking, but also to stimulate the acquisition of drugs. Another interesting metrics, as you noticed, I like numbers. So in Bangladesh, 36.4 million methamphetamine tablets were seized in 2020. In Bhutan, the cannabis seized also doubled. The quantities of heroin and cannabis seized in Maldives continue to be in the rise. So that gives us the picture that the phenomenon and the illicit trafficking and by coincidence the level of consumption are also under extremely pressure globally. In Sri Lanka, also the interception of significant quantities of heroin in its territorial waters have obviously continued to rise. In Nepal, also, the National Drug Survey indicates that more than 130,000 are obviously registered as drug users. And I think this reveals also the perspective on a global trend that purchasing drugs over the internet, and in particular in the dark net, trading platforms continue to be used and be facilitated by narco groups. On the health side, COVID-19 pandemic made it more difficult to people with substance use disorders to access health care and obviously treat their own diseases. And the most serious, young people are continuing to use more drugs than adults. What are obviously, in our perspective, the consequences of drug use? This will naturally stimulate the illicit trafficking, will also diminish the productivity in different societies, and of course this green picture has only one consequence: we need to act. And we need to act, in our opinion, together, and naturally our perspective, dear friends and partners, is obviously to continue to work on the early stages of contacts with substances. Drugs affect not only human lives, but also global economy, social dynamics, human rights, and overall security and stability of the nations. The impact on children and youth is particularly significant. Unfortunately, many young people and children are increasingly consuming drugs these days, and obviously this region is not an exception. Drugs' impact on mental health, tensions on families and communities are obviously having a connectivity with the rates of crime, social instability, and also reducing of productivity and labor insertion. Overall, in our perspective again, the coordinated multi-stakeholders response is necessary to address drug use and needs the involvement of all of you, all of us, and of course not only governments, state actors, civil society, obviously communities, and obviously we as United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime want to continue to work alongside you to obviously prevent and tackle the drug abuse. Allow me also to share what we think could be some of the guiding principles. First, building trust. The fact that I received the invitation to be here needs that we build a small trust with you, with all of you, to share and also to be able to learn from you how we can be more efficient. Second element, the strong community engagement. I think when I look at the gift of this international forum, that we see the small children coming and be in the middle of a family, and the family puts the eye on the children, I think this is obviously part of our approach to obviously continue to give this continuity engagement. Reduce stigma and look at addictions as a disease, not only as a criminal justice responsibility to address drug use or illicit trafficking. Fourth element, if I may, foster multi-stakeholders action. The diversity of persons around this room also reveals that we are continue to go in that direction. Advance evidence-based intervention, promote dignity, empathy, empower young and obviously the youth generations to take action against illicit trafficking and drug use. So far, I think we need to keep a word in our mind, which is act together. And I do think you can count on us to act together. A few elements on families, and I think this was very highlighted on the statistics, the need to continue to have the families as a catalytic force to have, I would say, a more shielding principles and values to avoid an initial contacts with drug abuse disorders, and also to have a response to drug abuse patterns of consumption and avoiding. Billy will enter, my colleague, in more details in some of the initiatives that we have on that field, but I want also to finish this element with one sentence. Evidence-based parenting skills and family skills training programs are for us essential if we want to be efficient to reduce the early engagement with drugs. The youth angle you see here is part of our initiatives. We worked recently and we continue to work at local level. We have worked with more 16 states in India to work with teachers, educators, to give them the tools to talk about complex situations as drug abuse are concerned, and also how this is obviously catalytic to avoid and create a more resilient youth. I'm aware of another challenge in my presentation, which is basically that I'm the one standing between you and the next break. So this reveals also another responsibility. And I'll try to fulfill this responsibility by showing this. Anyone knows where is this picture from? So, since I'm not a good speaker as you, that you encourage and engage, but also try to do my part and my team identify this picture. But why did I identify this picture? I'll go to that in a few minutes. So from our perspective, and almost concluding, wrapping up my intervention, health-central, rights-based, and gender-responsive approaches are for us essential if you want to address drug use and obviously its related diseases. We need to continue to learn from all of you, try to shape our interventions to your needs, and obviously we continue to stand ready to work with the governments, law enforcement agencies, but especially the society drivers, which are all of you, and obviously civil societies put us at the center of our work. It is a shared responsibility, and obviously the Sustainable Development Goals identify the last Sustainable Development Goal, which is the 17. Anyone wants to tell what it says, the 17th goal of the Sustainable Development Goals? Anyone wants to risk to say what it says? It is around partnerships, in the sense of partnerships build the goals itself, and it's, I would say, central to move forward the different Sustainable Development Goals. And in these topics, obviously, these partnerships to act together are, in our perspective, essential. So, this is a boat race, as you understand, and in a boat race through the mighty, dangerous rivers, drug use is like a rough ride. And obviously, like every leader of those boats, that sets the tone where we need to go, our strength, and the path of our rowing. We all don't reach our goal if we don't row in the same direction at the same pace. So for my sense and my perspective, besides this will be a selfie that will stay in my memory books, my first official travel in South Asia as representative of UNODC. I want also to see, this marks the beginning of my journey with all of you and rowing in the same direction and together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marco. Mr. Marco quizzed us on the SDG goals, so in case any other speaker quizzes you on the UNCRC, we have that in the notepad. When you open it, you have all the child rights there. Okay, so I would like to welcome someone very special. We have someone with us who is a stranger to none of us here. I would like to welcome Mr. Esbjörn Hörnberg, the 22nd Executive Director, Movendi International, was the President of the World Federation Against Drugs since May 2018. Up till March 2018, he was the Vice Chairman of the Vienna NGO Committee on Drugs and the Chair of the Civil Society Task Force on Drugs. From 2003, he served as the Executive Director of IOGT International, the global network now known as Movendi International, to prevent and reduce the harm caused by alcohol and other drugs. Before working with the international and development issues, he spent 17 years as a civil servant in the education sector, social welfare, and community administration. I welcome Mr. Esbjörn Hörnberg.
Dear friends, I'm Esbjörn Hörnberg and I'm happy to be here again, I must say. I learned from the chief economist of the World Bank that you should start the presentation with a joke. I have tried that a number of times. Once in Vietnam with a parliamentary session, they didn't laugh. So I will not. I will start with saying that I have been here before in Trivandrum. It was called Trivandrum at that time, due to Johnson. We had planned That was in the middle of the 1990s. We were in the same board of IGT International for a number of years, and we had planned to do something in south of India. I have been in Sri Lanka for a number of times, and I tried to combine that. So I came here to Trivandrum, and we had a tour to drug-free and alcohol-free university together with the governor of Kerala. And before going back, Johnson should have a special program in a college for women. So we went there, and I wanted to see how this program could run out, or turn out. And then he told me that, oh, Esbjörn, I need to go to the bank. Yes, I said that for me it's going to the bank that takes 20 minutes more or less, and then you're back and so. So he left me on the stage with 800 girls in front of me and went to the bank. And he returned 2 hours later. And I was sitting there on the stage, and this was just before Christmas. And in Kerala, I didn't know anything of what to do. So I thought that maybe I should try to tell them what we are doing in midsummer in Sweden. Because that was, I tried to learn them some dances together with children, how we enjoy the highlight in Sweden and our custom there. So in a couple of hours, together with some women, some young girls and so on, we were doing some very silly dances on the stage. And then Johnson came and rescued me from the last of this. When I was told that coming back here to Kerala, I was here in 2019 with a very successful session there and the program, and I was so impressed by Cici and Diana and the staff of Fourth Way and Project Wenda. We went to see the football tournament, and this is actually where I feel the best way. When I'm out of this room, when I'm down on the ground, together with people, together with children, and so, and see what society can do, civil society. And then they asked me to come here this year, and I think this is, I could talk about child rights or whatever, and suddenly I saw in the program that I should talk about civil society, what and why. And this is some reflections from me. You must understand that I'm a Swedish guy. I'm born, raised in this little country far up north. We think we are in the middle of the world. We are the leading country, more or less, when it comes to, at least we was, when it comes to moral and educational and so on. But due to this organization that I have been a member of for, well, actually 60 years now, I had the possibility to visit some of our organizations around the world, in Africa. That was a real experience. I can well understand where human beings raised. I must say, together with women's group in the West Africa in the middle of the night when the electricity is gone and you are dancing with the drums, then you feel that you are a human being in a way. You feel that you are together with someone. It's not artificial. It's not on the computer. It's not on the screen. And then coming to Asia, to find out the culture here, I can understand that we are fooled. We are, well, I don't know what we are way back north, but anyway, we are pretending a lot of things. So, with this said, you must understand my background and how I look upon civil society. Now let's see. When it comes to civil society, you have to discuss it. You need to put it in where it is. we often, I'm not an academic person when it comes to this. It's my perspective, I must say. So please take it for what it is like this. But we have the state. The state is responsible for the army, the security, some kind of the police, and running the country when it comes. In some countries they are efficient when it comes to electricity, the postal service. Other countries, they are selling it out. And then you have the society between the state and the family. And the family is also something you can discuss all over the world. What is a family? In Africa, you have very big extended families. When I say, who is this person that you say you are your brother? Oh, yes, he's from the same village. I think he's some relative, but we call him brother. But in my country, we have mother, father, and then the siblings, and you have the cousins, and you go further down a little bit, and so on. So the family, and then when coming back to Sweden, you can say the family is shrinking. We are not big families. My mother and father, they had 6, 7 siblings, and now I have one sister, my children are 2, and in a number of families, it's only 1. They are single families. So this is, you cannot say that family is something like this, but if you define the society like this, you have state. And state, what is a state? Is it expanding, it's taking everything, it's taking the society more or less, or is something like that. And what society? Yeah, then you have the business, and in our country we can say you have people's movement. We are very proud of that in Sweden, of the people's movement. The trade unions, the religious groups, the temperance organizations, because they build the democracy of Sweden. They form the democracy. So we call it the people's movements. And inside the people's movements, when I look into the dictionary, they say that my organization is a non-profit movement. It's not a political one, it's not a religious one, it's a non-profit. And then when you look upon the non-profit movements, you can define them as grassroots. Today we have more professional civil society or non-profit movements. And then you have the gongos. I met the gongos, the governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations. That's silly, but that was created during the time when some countries, some governments could see that if you had an NGO, you get funding from more sources outside the normal ones. And how to deal with that? Is that a gongo? I met them, for example, when it comes to drugs. You have it in Southeast Asia. You have an umbrella called International Federation of Non-Governmental Organizations that was founded some 20, 25 years ago. And it was founded by the governments more or less in the Southeast, or in the ASEAN region, with national organizations, national NGOs that was monitored and governed by the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Justice, or whatever. And there was some kind of civil society, but it was always looking up for the governmental directives and the laws and what was changing. So we need to look into what kind of organizations is civil society really? Is it the grassroots? Is it democratic ruled? Or is it steered by something else? And what we have seen now, the last decade, is that the space for civil society is shrinking. There is more civil society organizations. They are growing, 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 but the space, what they can do is limited. We can see it in Europe, we can see it in Asia, we can see it everywhere. And then you can ask, is there a threat of civil society? Of course it is. For the ruling parties, it's a threat. Because civil society mostly are gathering people who want to do something else than the life is right now. They can support part of society. They can support part of what we are doing. But mostly they are looking at the obstacles, the challenges for people, for young people, for children, for marginalized people, for drug addicts, whatever. There you have it. They want to have change. Obama used the word changed when he succeeded the president race. And then change was gone when he faced reality. Really sorry. But we need to understand that civil society is looking to change something. Either to support something good that is a minority in the society. It's very seldom civil society is the majority, the ruling class or something like that. If it is, it's been captured by something. And today we can see leaders of civil society are killed, are deported, are refused to say something, and are kept in asylum. When we, from my organization, Movendi International, look upon, we as a civil society, who are we combating? Who is the, let's say, enemy? I don't actually would like to say enemy, but on the other side. Well, first of all, we have the big alcohol, the companies. They are using everything to increase the market, to get more and more people to drink alcohol, to use it in more efficient way for them, and to have the revenue. And when looking at, I don't have any figures. I'm an educated economist, but I don't have figures in my presentation here. But when you say that alcohol is normal, you don't say that the majority of the people around the globe are not using alcohol. They don't say that. They are pretending that everyone is using it. If you look in the country where we are now, in India, a majority of people are not using alcohol. You are smashing liquor stores in Kerala. You are doing everything to get rid of this burden. But what we can see in the newspaper, what we can see on the social net is use this, be brave, be fantastic, you be a new person, and you be loved by others. So big alcohol is one of the key objects we are facing. Then we have the big tobacco. Big tobacco was the first, you can say, organization that used the playbook where we have marijuana today. They wanted us to use tobacco as a medical thing from the beginning. It was good for people to use tobacco. Then it was recreational. And they hid all the evidence of what tobacco caused for the body, for society. They are doing the same when it comes to marijuana. They have bought the trademarks, they have gone in in the companies. You can see them are sharing business. The role models are there. So big tobacco is the other one. And then we have the narcotic drugs. They are now in the social media. They are everywhere, as you can see, as the last presenter said. And together with this, you can wash the money, the dirty money, into white money. And as I have been working, as you saw from my CV more or less, on the global side with this for a number of years, I have also been discussing the terrorism. When the narcotic feed the cash and the weapons industry and the terrorist threat. I'm not sure that they can survive without it. I'm sure they can, but it's a big part of it. So in this sense, the narcotic drugs is the third element we have to face. And then coming to civil society organization. We can see that society as a whole has developed. CC said that we are screenagers, or at least not, well, we are as well, I can see from the mobile phones and so on. But the civil society has developed. And we need, in a way, to follow. We need to see what we can do. The membership, my organization has individual members in local branches, in national organizations, and then up to this international umbrella. We can see that the number of individual members in the local clubs are shrinking. They are not going to gatherings today, in the Western world at least. They are more individual. They are not thinking in a collective way. In a collective way is against more or less how the world is going into the populist right-wing way, or if it's going back to, if it stays for solidarity. But what we can see is we have a problem when it comes to the structure. 15 years ago we understood that. We said to ourselves, what is our core values? What do we need to do to have some kind of impact, to have better public health and so on? And we went down, how are we presented? What are we saying? How are we organized and so on? And what are our membership? And we started the journey from there. And step by step, first we became a member of ECOSOC. This is another story. When applying for a membership in ECOSOC, they asked me as a representative of our organization, can we have your legal status when you were founded from your government? Yeah, I said, this is a problem for us because we were founded 150 years ago. And at that time, they didn't say that you are allowed to work. The society was not this, it's going to work. So in a way, we had to step up to be a Swedish local organization. That was okay for the UN. And now they understand a little bit more. We started to work in the UN system. With that, we had also good connections to the World Health Organization, WHO. And with the expertise from our membership, we could create something that was important for WHO to understand. Because you had the alcohol companies, and the influence from the alcohol companies on the governments in UK, in US, Japan, and China, and so on. And they was very influential when it comes to the UN system as well. So to have WHO to talk about alcohol, no, that was a no way. But slowly, talking to different friendly governments in Central Europe, in the Nordic countries, in Africa, in Asia. We have had partners in India, we have partners in Sri Lanka, we have partners in Thailand, in Uganda, in Kenya, South Africa, and so on. Together with them, we could build the momentum where even WHO accepted that they needed to do something. The lobbying from the alcohol, big alcohol, was immense, but we did it. And now there is a global alcohol action plan that has been adopted. And we are, as an organization, attending the board of WHO when they have board meetings as just visitors, but we can talk between two eyes during the tea break and so on. And we have continued to do this, step by step, building up programs together with other civil society organizations, other networks. WFAD is one part of it because we had to, in a way, take away the narcotic drugs and see that there are more organizations supporting the work against narcotic drugs, but they are not alcohol-free like Movendi International. So that's why WFAD was created as a sub, as another network where we are members. And this is what we are doing right now. We are trying to find out cancer societies. They are very supportive. They can understand that alcohol and cancer has a number of links and so on. And this is how we can build a new organization where we can have other membership models and so on. I have said liberal forces here on the slide, and that's what I mean with that is those who are working to liberate, to have decriminalized or legalized cannabis or drugs. What I haven't talked about is the funding of civil society. Where do we have our money? Is it from members? Some of us have, depending on what kind of organization you have. You have membership fees or what contributions in that. Some is funding by governments, local governments or national ones. Some have funding from different other sources. When it comes to those who want to decriminalize and legalize drugs, they have big fundings from foundations. And this is also critical because some of the foundations are working with more than drugs, of course. This is just a small part of their work. So part of the foundation's work is very good, but then they are seeing the liberalization, the legalization of drugs as a liberal thing for them. And we need to discuss this, we need to front this, but they have the money there and they can expand in their way, and we need to challenge that. Now something is happening. That was more or less the last slide. So what we are doing I need to have the last. It comes up. Good. So now where do we go from now? Because we have seen the scene. We know how it has developed, the civil society. But in the future, what can we do? And I can see two things. First of all, I can see a new generation, the young generation, even if they are very individual in a way and they are sitting there with the computers and everything, they don't tolerate what governments, authorities are saying. They don't obey in the threat and so on. So this is something we need to take to us, that there is a movement around the world when it comes to climate change, when it comes to freedom, when it comes to young girls' rights, whatever. We can see it in Iran, how they fight against the regime. They cut off their hairs. They are willing to go to prison. They even risk their lives, number of them. We can see it in Myanmar, where young people are going against the military. They want to have freedom. They want to be part of a better future. This is part we need to find those people. We need to take their engagement, their commitment. We need to have to our civil society. On the other hand, they are very individualistic in the things. More of them are looking to my future and so on. When it comes to the Western world, you can see. So this is something I really cannot project. I cannot see where to go to meet those two. But my hope and my belief is that you who are sitting here, you who are working with those people, you who know their needs, and you who also understand the strength and the commitment and the power the young generation have if they can express, and with the guidance of people who are on the right side, they can also be part of a civil society that will flourish in the future. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to see what you can do during the next days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hörnberg. We will have a short tea break now for half an hour. So before we go for the tea break, I will just like to bring your attention to the 50 youth representatives we have here. Can you just stand up, the young people? Yes, let's give a round of applause to them. Okay, because after the tea break, they will be going for their session in the adjoining venue. So before we go for the tea break, I would also like to mention and especially thank our online participants on Zoom. We have an overwhelming participation online. You can see right there behind our Zoom participants, some of them have turned on their videos and some of them have logged in very early. Like friends from Sweden have just messaged that they had to log in very early to be part of this forum, and I especially acknowledge their presence here, and I thank all the participants online and all those who are viewing on YouTube. Thank you so much for being part of the forum. And it's when I stand here, it's so good to see that every chair is filled, and it's been a very overwhelming morning, and I thank each and every one of you from coming from wherever you've come from and being part of this forum. So we will now break for a short tea break. We have half an hour. You can take your tea and come back if you like, because the Shingari Melam, the percussion orchestra, will be playing on a softer tone, I hope, for all of you. But if you want to watch, they will be playing here. So we will break for the tea break, and the youth representatives, you can move to your hall. Just another announcement for the Youth Forum. Participants of the Youth Forum, can you come to the front of the stage? We want to take a group picture. So can you kindly come forward? Youth Forum participants, can you kindly come forward? We want to take a picture. Right here on the front. Yeah. henceforth. So
bleedy, it means that I cry a lot. So I was tearing up during the messages from the young people from around the world. It was very beautiful, so I thank you so much. Also, thank you to the UNODC for partnering with us on this very important event. Thank you to our collaborators and the team again, and a special thank you to our very own Cressida, who from the World Federation side has really been instrumental in supporting this. It's not close enough. I have to do this. Okay. Thank you. It's also great to see such a high participation, not only from governments, from international institutions, from civil society, as well as the youth leaders who are here, now in the different room, but together on Friday we'll have the opportunity to exchange with them. And also a final thank you to our colleague in Sweden, Sarah Heine, who during our capacity strengthening event on children's rights had a great presentation, and from her presentation I was able to borrow some slides. So I've sourced her in those slides, so you'll know exactly which ones I've borrowed. All right. You've heard already who we are, WFAD, very fast-growing multilateral community of organizations and individuals from all the world regions. Last time that I was here together with Esbjörn and many of you in 2019, we had 250 members across the world. Today we have 380. And it really showcases the need to have a network where we can come together and work together on the joint views and the aims that we share to strengthen prevention, increase access to treatment, and to promote recovery. And in doing so, focusing particularly on the rights and the needs of women and children in our field. And it's thanks to our members, really, that we're growing. They're spreading the word, they're doing the great job, and it's just our humble opportunity to harness this awesome power of the world's NGOs. So everything that we say from the WFAD side really stems from the work that our great members across the world are doing. So thank you to you as well. It's a lot of thank yous now. All right. In the future, I will start putting out little numbers on this map, but just to highlight that we're a global organization, I've put this here. So, as we all know, and we've heard this morning, most children and adolescents will never use drugs, and those who do are oftentimes affected by vulnerabilities outside of their control. That being said, childhood and adolescence is the age time frame that is most prone to the beginning of an addiction. So this is why we really need to focus on children and youth in our prevention efforts. We know that using drugs at an early age has harmful consequences on the developing brain. And we know that through early interventions, primary and secondary interventions, we can really either prevent the use of drugs or hopefully avert the developing of the use of drugs and dependency. And I'm sure we'll hear this, and particularly from Matej after me. What we earn from prevention is that for every dollar spent, at least 10 can be saved in future health, crime, and social related costs. And this is a modest figure. I've read figures up to $1 in $64. So this is of the very most modest figure, 1 in every $10 we're saving. And not to mention the healthy and safe development of our children and youth. And really that's why we're all here. So, globally speaking, only a very few prevention activities have been monitored and evaluated. We have very little evidence to showcase really the effectiveness and the data-driven prevention across the world. And those that we do have is very Western-centered. It doesn't take into consideration the gender differences in why we use drugs, the consequences thereof, nor the prevention and where prevention works best, nor the cultural settings that we understand, and especially from today in these fantastic videos, that there are different cultural settings that we need to take into account. So I want you to bring with you, because I know many of you are doing great prevention efforts, to really monitor and evaluate this, to really showcase the evidence of your prevention strategy so that they can be used in the future, so that we can ensure that our interventions are evidence-driven. Let's see here. So, to the topic, I will go a bit into the Convention on the Rights of the Child and how we can use this in our efforts to advocate for prevention. I've said that evidence-based, gender-sensitive prevention really is the right way to go, and how can we ensure that this is followed? How can we ensure that we are provided more evidence-based prevention, and how can we manage the funding? It was mentioned earlier, but as civil society, the funding is key, and we need to try to find new ways to allow the government officials to really put the funding into prevention. We can't do these one-off, very short interventions, but they need to be sustainable. They need to take a long time, and for that, we really need the participation of the policymakers and the governments in all of our regions. So how can we ensure this? Globally, we have many great international frameworks. One such was mentioned, the SDGs, and particularly the Target 3.5 that sets us to strengthen prevention and treatment. We have the CEDAW Convention to end discrimination against women and girls and to eradicate gender-based violence. And we have the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And this convention is the most widely ratified human rights convention that we have, and the only human rights convention that particularly emphasizes the issue of illicit drugs. So first of all, the convention in itself sets out that every child, all children are children under the age of 18. So this is children, youth, adolescents, anybody under the age of 18 is a child in accordance to the convention. It furthermore applies to all children, everywhere, and especially those within the states that have ratified this convention. It was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1989 and went into effect a year later. And it has really helped transform the lives of children around the world. But as we all know, far from every child has every right. So let's take a look at this convention. To begin, unlike other human rights treaties, the CRC includes civil rights and political rights, as well as cultural, social, and economic rights. These different rights aren't ranked among themselves, but they form a whole. So we cannot withdraw one of these from the convention and use that, but we need to see them as something that all contributes to the rights of the child. And all United Nations member states, apart from the USA, have ratified this convention. And this means that every single government that has ratified this is responsible to respect the rights of the child within their country. And this includes children that are not citizens, children seeking asylum, or children who are lacking an identity card. This ratification also ensures that each of these governments have the obligation to ensure through different forms of international cooperation as well as national implementation, the rights of the child. So it's both an international agreement as it is a national one. The convention has 54 articles, and you can see them in the notepad, which is great. You can go through them in detail, but each of these are important, and again, they form a whole. But to guide the whole convention as a whole, there are 4 basic principles. So the overall purpose of the convention is to give rights and set minimum standards for children on the basis of their needs. And one main difference compared to the other human rights conventions is the principle of the best interest of the child, and this is Article 3. Because the article puts children's needs above adults' needs in any decision that concerns children and youth. This means that the best interest of the child means to put this first in all decisions concerning children and youth. Article 2, the non-discrimination. It means that this convention highlights all of the children in the world, no matter their region, no matter the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their gender, their ability or disability. It applies to each and every single person under the age of 18. Article 6 is about the right of survival and development, and this means that every child has the right to survive and that the state must do all it can to make sure that children survive and develop to their full extent possible. And I know that most of you have probably read the International Standards on Prevention, where the main goal is to ensure that children grow healthy and safe. So you can see the connections here with the CRC in terms of our obligations to protect children and young people. Article 12 is the respect for children's views. It means that every child has the right to express their views on the matters that affect them, and that these views must be taken into consideration. And these 4 basic principles contribute to a general attitude towards children and their rights. They are based on the notion, which I am sure we all agree to, that children are equal citizens, equal human beings in their own rights. The CRC makes clear that the children are competent and acting individuals, full citizens with rights, at the same time as they are in need of support and protection. So it's this dual. We need to support, but also listen and make sure that children and young people are included. And this also means that within the framework of the law, children are a subject, not an object, which is important when we work with the convention. Just briefly on how this is followed. To follow up on how the convention is being implemented, there's an independent monitoring body. It's the Committee on the Rights of the Child. This committee have grouped the convention into different clusters. And this showcases that the articles really are intertwined and work together throughout the session. But one such cluster that I'm sure that we all are working within is the special protection measures. So this means that the articles in this cluster talk about children in situations of exploitation, such as child labor, as well as trafficking, but also drugs. So I mentioned that this is the only convention, human rights convention, that specifically addresses the issue of illicit drugs, and it's done so in the Article 33. It was written when the United Nations conventions on narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances had already been approved. So this means that the CRC can be understood in relation to the United Nations Drug Control Conventions. So we should see these as a companion to the CRC. So what does the Article 33 of the CRC actually say? And I'll read this. State parties shall take appropriate measures, including legislative, administrative, and educational measures to protect children from the illicit use of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances as defined in the relevant international treaties. So this is the connection here to the United Nations Drug Control Conventions. And to prevent the use of children in the illicit production, trafficking, and use of such substances. So if we try to analyze this article and see what does it actually mean, what is it saying, the first bit is that the illicit use of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances should be prevented. It's a prevention framework. We should prevent our young people from initiating the use of drugs. Secondly, protection, sorry. We should protect our youth. Secondly, we should prevent the participation in the production, and thirdly, the trafficking of these substances. So in conclusion, what this means in this first part is that the state parties have to take all the measures appropriate, including legislative, administrative, social educational measures to ensure that children do not use drugs, they're not used in the trafficking or the production. And the use of the word prevents in this should be understood similarly to the other conventions that talk about prevention. Namely, that states should make sure that children are not involved. I added the bubble here. It says human rights are seen as a minimum standard. This means this is the very minimum standard, and states that do even more than what is regulated in the convention, that's just a gold star. It's great. That's what we're aiming for. So, the focus in recent years within the international drug debate has been on adult consumption. And the perspective in some cases have moved from preventing people from using drugs or supporting people into their recovery journeys to the use of drugs itself being seen as a human right. And this is among some groups. This is a shift that actually ignores the obligation to protect children from drugs. And this we could see in this morning from Amy. All of these people who use drugs, there are children there. This also shows that we need to remind the policymakers that they need to make a primary consideration of the children and their rights and always ask these questions. Is this in the best interest of the child? Is this decision we're making now in conformity with the CRC and the Article 33? This does not mean that everything is fine as is. I mean, we're all working together to make the world a better place, like Esbjörn said. This means instead that we need to work with advocacy to improve the existing policies that are good and to ensure that we have a more humane drug policy that focuses on prevention, treatment, recovery, and reintegration to comply with the CRC without opening up for the legalization of drugs. From our end, we advocate for a humane drug policy that is rooted in the continuum of care. So from prevention to reintegration, this is the continuum of care with highlighting the need for recovery-oriented systems of care within this situation. So, how do we do this, and how do we advocate for better drug policies? In order to do so, we need to first strengthen our own knowledge about the situation in our society, in our local community, in our country. We need to do this in relation to which level we're trying to advocate towards. But we also need to map out which actors are there. The grassroots actors, the people that are important for these local communities, the faith-based leaders, the civil society, the schools, the after-school activities, the authorities, and see who are there and who do we need to involve on this matter. As you all know, and as I'm sure we'll hear a lot today, drug use is not an isolated phenomenon, but is strongly linked to other risk factors, both as a cause and an effect. Children are affected in an environment of addiction and dependence. They may experience insecurity, various forms of violence, or other shortcomings in care. With a home environment that may lack security and structure, it becomes more difficult for the child to cope with the rest of their lives in terms of school and friends and peer pressure. And the risk may increase that they themselves will end up in risky behaviors and maybe even drug use. And using drugs is a risk factor in itself for several other situations, such as dropping out of school, not managing the relations to family and friends, illness, etc. And on the contrary, dropping out of school or not having a stable situation at home increases the risk of drug use being involved. So you see, it's very integrated, and we need to work on this in all measures. And I mentioned that we have little evidence on prevention, and this is true to some extent, because what we do know is that research that we have showcase that we need to strengthen the protective factors in place for children and young people. We can see the differences for girls and boys. Prevention in schools work better for boys, prevention in the families work better for girls, and we need to ensure that this is all part of our needs and mapping when we're trying to implement interventions. We also know, and this is something that Project Venda really showcases, that enjoying school and having access to good leisure activities are really important protective factors in place. And they can prevent both drug use, but also other risk behavior or mental unhealth and other situations. And I'm sure we'll go through this as well, and we've heard it already. Children and youth are more vulnerable because of the developing brain. So this means that the drug use can have serious consequences on the child's development, both in short-term and long-term. But advocating for prevention and early interventions can be used or done through using their CRC. And here it's not only the Article 33, it's one of our main guiding tools. It addresses illicit drugs, it sets the tone for governments to follow. We are to prevent and protect, but we do also have 48 or 54, depending on how you read it. The last ones are how to read the convention. Preventive tools. These are guiding us. I'm sure that most of our governments here have ratified the CRC, and this means that this is something that should guide them. You can see, for example, respect for children's views. Children without families should be supported. Protect them from violence. This is all within a framework of prevention. And I won't quiz you on this, but I'll leave it here, or we have it on our table so you can read it later. So, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, again, is a legally binding international agreement for those countries who have ratified it. So this is all the member states of the United Nations, except for the US, and I'm sorry for saying that again. And ratification means in this event that governments commit themselves to ensuring that they meet the standards of the convention. So governments are obliged to bring their legislation, their policy, and their practice into accordance with the best interest of the child, and to really transform the standards into reality for all children, and to abstain from any action that may preclude the enjoyment of the rights as stipulated in this convention. And whether the convention itself becomes law or not is partly due to the political situation in the country, but also partly due to the constitution. And if you ask, I'll answer, but it has to do with the form of government that you have. Either it becomes directly a national law as you ratify it, or you need to make certain legal decisions to make sure that it's a national law. And one country who has done the latter is Sweden. I'm also from Sweden, like Esbjörn. I'm not from up north. I'm from a very, very small island in the middle of the ocean with 67 people on it. So I'm very happy to be here. And I was saying yesterday at dinner, I was saying my island, and I didn't realize that I was saying that, but I could really backtrack my generations there to say that I can probably not advocate for the whole island, but in certain events I'll say my island. So, this little place in the north of Europe, Sweden, we had discussions for a long time. Should the Convention on the Rights of the Child become law? And of course, there were arguments both for and against. Those that argued against said that it makes no difference. The Convention is already legally binding when it's been ratified. However, many child rights organizations came together and worked really hard to ensure that it did become a law. And so it was made into a law and started, how do I say that, it was become a law from the 1st of January 2020. So the fact that the CRC is a Swedish law, does that mean any changes? Have we seen any, differences in our legislation? It's been 2 years, so we're still waiting on the first real, monitoring systems. But what we can say for now is what I've put here on the slide. The fact that it has become law means that children's rights are given a stronger position, and that we as a society and a legal framework are giving a sharper legal tool to protect each and every individual child. This applies particularly to children in vulnerable situations, and as you heard in the beginning, this includes non-citizens, people seeking asylum, people lacking identity cards, and so on. So it's an important tool for all children within this Swedish society. As a law, the convention also functions as a safety net where other laws fail. So this is also a very important topic for Sweden. And this also means that all public activities must be permeated from a child's rights perspective. Before we had it within social work. As a social worker myself, I went through the system of the child rights focus, but now this means that all authorities need this education. Every single one who is employed by the municipalities, by the state, we go through this to see how can we ensure that children's rights are in center, and how can we ensure children's rights approach. We also, as you can see here, we also see that as a law, it has priority over rules and regulations that are not statutory. So the fact that the convention has been given the status of law is also a political sign that we're working on this issue together. So that being said, whether the convention is a law or not, we can still use it to advocate for better policies. So to finish, I have 26 seconds left. As civil society, we can use the Convention on the Rights of the Child to really bank on our policymakers, and I've borrowed this term from Diana, who speaks it brilliantly. We can bank on our policymakers, our political leaders, our governments, and reiterate the fact that they are obligated by this convention. They need to ensure the protection and the prevention and create substance abuse-free and safe environments for our children. By developing child-centered supportive policies and legal framework, by enhancing the scientific evidence and research, which is gender disaggregated by gender, and ensuring a comprehensive system through coordinating multiple sectors and levels, establishing training for policymakers and practitioners, and to hold the governments accountable, to ensure that, they are answering to what have you done? Is this aligned with the CRC? How has the children's rights been taken into consideration in this new policy, in this decision, in the drug policy like we've seen here earlier this morning? So to finish, effective, evidence-based, gender-sensitive prevention methods can significantly contribute to the positive engagement of children, youth, and adults in their families, in their schools, in civil society, in the workplace, and in the community. So I thank you for your time. And yeah, thank you. And I guess questions. If you have any questions for me, please go ahead. I'll also add this. You can see how you can become a member, not only of WFAD, but of the Recovered Users Network. And my contact is up there on the screen as well, if you want to get in touch with me. Billy has a question? This will be.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Regina, for the presentation. And I take the floor because I didn't see any other hands. Otherwise, I would just stay down. But thanks so much for the very important and interesting presentation. I wonder, and because also looking in the audience, there are many civil society organizations. And given the work that you do at WFAD and many other organizations do in their own communities, and having also explained that the right of the child, the convention, is now a law in Sweden, I wonder whether you could elaborate on how you as civil society organization as WFAD, how has this changed your work? And how do you benefit from this convention being now a law in Sweden as a Swedish-based organization, of course also operating internationally? I wonder whether this has made a difference also for you as an NGO in Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. I should have brought a pen up here so I can write down all the parts of the question. In terms of how WFAD has seen the CRC have become a law, there's no coincidence that our members voted for the 10-year strategic plan, thank you so much, in 2020 to specifically include the rights and the needs of women and children within our field. This is also where we incorporated to a greater extent the rights of the child within our whole policy structure. So within our guiding principles, within our measures toward our colleagues and our members, we've had capacity strengthening trainings. We've decided that at least 2 out of our 4 events each year shall specifically address children's rights and women's rights. And also the fact that, and now because we have our annual Congress every 2 years, in this Congress in June, based on the 10-year strategic plan, we updated our constitution to better incorporate a child-centered policy within the whole framework on which our work is built. So that's for WFAD. In terms of the civil society in Sweden, from what I understand, civil society working directly with children's rights have been given a larger space. So Esbjörn spoke about the shrinking space, and this we can see. But in terms of anything now that happens that is a policy or a government decision, civil society working specifically with children's rights are invited. So this is really a good, I mean, it was happening before, but sometimes when we're invited, they sort of listen with a half ear and they make a note that we were there, civil society, but now it's really actually incorporated into the structures and the framework. So that's a great situation. In terms of the actual day-to-day business, as a social worker myself, it did ensure that this was better integrated for future social work bachelor's degrees. So as of now, when I finalized, I started working 2014 with unaccompanied minors. I went a course on child-centered policy and how to really place the child in the center of anything that we do. But now, from what I understand, is that this is incorporated already in the education of social workers, as well as the education of teachers, the education of police. So it does, I mean, we're yet to sort of reap the fruits of the effects of this, but we can see the political change and really applaud the Swedish, government and all the structures in doing this work. And saying that, I should also say that thank you to the Swedish Embassy for being represented here. If you think that I'm saying something wrong, please let me know and update me. So thank you. I hope that got it. Yeah. Yep.
Can you hear me? Yeah. As a person who hails from the United States, I'm dumbfounded by the idea that we have not signed on to this convention. And can you explain why the United States would not want to sign on to this convention? I just can't believe it.
Yeah, it's, I mean, something may have changed in the recent years, but the US hasn't signed the CEDAW Convention either on eliminating violence and discrimination against women and girls. I think maybe signed but not ratified, but still we see UN Women and the Center for these work with children are located in the US. So locally or nationally, I'm not sure how the discussions have been, but what I can say is that several explanations for this are usually mentioned in terms of the US and not having ratified, and I've written them down because I was sure this question was going to come. It is firstly that ratification would make the convention a supranational provision that could take over the state laws, so the individual states of the country. And that the civil and political rights of the convention can be accepted, this is what the US have said, but not the economic, social, and the cultural ones. So as we saw, these form a whole. So you can't take one or the other, so that's one of the reasons as well. And then the final reason why I put here on my cheat note is, I borrowed this from a colleague. So this one, it says that ratification would give children too strong rights at the expense of parental rights. So as we see in the CRC, this convention puts children's rights above the human rights of adults when it's issues concerning children. And this has been used in the explanation, but I'm saying it and it sounds very strange as I say it, but it's based on the discussions that were made. But then again, I'm sure that there are a lot of different, parts of the convention because you have signed it so that each, individual state and the overarching policymakers are working with. But I kindly ask you as US, yourself and Amy, to have a little bit of a look and see how the debate is and see if we can maybe bring it to the... Amy says that they said that the US have said that they're going to ratify it, but they're concerned about these issues that I mentioned, the economic, social, and political issues. And the children having more power over parents, more power, but you understand, human rights. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's strange to tell a US citizen about your country, so I'm a little bit nervous about that fact, but I hope it was okay. Oh, Shante? No?
I think I can say that.
Yeah.
I'm representing World Restoration Campus Union, and here I'm hearing more about children and youth. We start from unborn children. So we say that the mother who is taking alcohol and drug doesn't give a choice to the child. They are born, without a choice. So we should start from there. The second point I would like to make is that, as mentioned before by Mr. Joseph, he was saying that this age is not youth age. This is the screen age, children. So that is also a mind altering. As a psychologist, I would say that it's a mind altering thing. So with drug and alcohol, we should also keep in mind that now we have this new challenge where our children and youth are more addictive to the social media or network policies, and that is leading their life and kind of guiding them into which way they are going right now. So we need to address that also.
Thank you so much. Really important additions, and I thank you for that. It's really, we need to support the pregnant mothers as well, and prevention needs to start very young. We talk about children and adolescents, but it's also the pregnant mothers, and from the very beginning. And I know that we'll hear a lot about this from our different great speakers, and when to start and how different interventions can be handled through these different processes in life. And the second thing you mentioned, also very great. Maybe even the CRC should be updated to include this screen age situation, because we were in Serbia last week for a conference on recovery, and there was one panel that spoke about the non-substance addictions, and this includes screens. And I think it's important that we keep this in mind and to learn from the young people who are living in it, because, you know, it changes so fast that now, 5 years ago, I could help my mom with anything on her phone, and now I don't understand anything. But young people and children, they understand this, and we need to really work together with these people, these young teenagers, to see how we can create better prevention strategies within the realm of these screens and social media. So thank you so much for that addition.
Okay, I think I should say bravo to Regina for the phenomenal work that you are doing. And if you permit me, I'd like to ask the question, what in your opinion do you think needs to be done from your perspective so we can better, domesticate the, Convention on the Rights of Children more effectively across the nations?
Sorry, thank you so much. What can we do to?
Yeah, to have this convention domesticated across the nations, more effectively.
Thank you so much. Well, civil society is key here. As we saw in Sweden, it was really the civil society and the people's movement that pushed for the convention becoming a law. But then again, depending on how your government is structured, the convention can already have the same legally binding tools. So it's already in place for most of our countries out of the, all of the ratifying member states. Instead, we should advocate towards our governments, to our local politicians and our leaders, to ensure that they're following the convention that they have signed. It may have been their predecessors, but they're still working in the government that has officially ratified and signed this. And I'll borrow something from the Giovanna Campello from UNODC, because she said this so great. When we work with advocacy, we often focus on the political leaders, the people who are elected. And these people, they have 4 years, 3 years, 5 years to carry out something and show the effectiveness of the work that they're doing. So they may not be receptive to, doing this sustainable long-term implementation of children's rights, working with these very, long plans that cost sometimes a lot of money and sometimes not, but it's the length, because they want these effective showcases towards the next election. So what she recommended, which I will now say because I love that, is that we focus on those who are employed within the governments, the policymakers, the political secretaries, the people working in administration, and everybody else who are going to remain within the bodies, even though the political leaders are elected in and out. So I think that is a good way to start, but using really civil society to get there is key. We can work together to make our voices heard. And I'm over time, so I would love to discuss this more in the break. Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Regina. I just would like to read out this message we got online from Zoom for you, Regina. You have been an inspiration to us in Kenya, and I strongly believe many more nations in the world. My team loves you, and they are anxious to tap into Sweden's mental health and wellness bucket. Dear Regina, soon we shall journey to your island of 64 residents. We got this message. Due to shortage of time, we cannot take all the questions, and to the viewers online, there are some questions. I think we will send these questions to Regina, and she can probably type out the answers to you. Okay. The next speaker is Mr. Matej, the director of the Institute for Research and Development, UTRIP. He's been working in prevention advocacy for alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs for over 22 years. In Slovenia, he has been leading the network Preventive Platform for more than 10 years. Since 2006, he has been involved in more than 25 European health, justice, education, youth, and research projects as a project or work package leader. He is a PhD candidate in preventive science at the University of Zagreb, Croatia, the president of International Federation of Research Associations in the field of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and deputy chairperson of the Vienna NGO Committee on Drugs. I welcome Mr. Matej.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This is a great honor and opportunity to be here. I more like to walk around the stage, like Carlton, same kind of person. So I'm not used to the stage so much, but I will try to handle this situation. Oh yeah, thank you. Yes, that's much better. Yeah, I feel better if I walk a little bit on the stage, not so nervous. I'm going to speak about some new stuff. Although some of you already heard about my slides, my presentation, so I'm sorry, I feel sorry for you to repeat things again and again, but I think it's important to repeat some of the topics I will present and highlight in my presentation. This is always my first slide, because many years ago I've been treated as an enemy in the room, elephant in the room, while presenting some ineffective or harmful approaches in prevention. And people recognize themselves in my slides. So I would like to stay your friend after my presentation. So this is a disclaimer, which is always the first slide in my presentation. So don't kill the messenger. I'm only the messenger, and I'm proud to be a messenger for evidence-based prevention, and blame all those institutions listed on the slide. So it's their fault. So don't kill the messenger. Yeah, you know, all of us entered in some point in prevention field, and we all feel excited. We wanted to change the world. We wanted to change things and the future of our children and adults, etc. But, you know, goodwill is not always enough in prevention field. There is a huge science behind. So we have to respect standards in prevention. We have to respect evidence which is behind prevention, effective prevention approaches. And in many cases, this is a huge obstacle, because I present at many conferences or trainings to people which are in the field for 20, 30, 40 years, and there is a lack of self-criticism quite often in the room, so they are not really keen or open enough to accept the evidence and the science behind prevention interventions. But we have to keep saying that despite the negative responses from the audience. And I'm willing to do that for the next, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years. So I'm willing to be a target for those kind of people and meet their, not wrong, but maybe misperceptions, or could say wrong expectations in the field of prevention. So really goodwill and the common sense sometimes in prevention, science and practice don't work well. So we have to respect the evidence and the science. And the reality is sometimes really very different, because coming to India or Kenya or to some low and middle income countries with some high-tech prevention programs and interventions, it will not work. You will fail for sure. So the needs of different people, different target populations are very different, and we have to do first needs assessment. We have to meet people, talk to them, ask them a million questions to find out what is their need and what they want to do, or what are the chances for them to be successful in the field. So the reality matters, like children matter, of course, and the reality and our attitudes toward science, to evidence, matters as well. And of course, we speak a lot about drugs and alcohol and different risk behaviors, but the reality in prevention field today is multiple risks are present everywhere. And if we stuck with one risk behavior, we are very soon out of date, because new generations bring new risk behaviors, and if we stick with one risk behavior, after 10 years or 15 years, we're out of focus completely. So we have to educate ourselves, constantly learn about different risk behaviors and put them in the context. Like in prevention science, risk and protective factors are now the main focus, not the risk behaviors themselves. So we have to remember this, because almost every risk behavior share pretty much the same risk and protective factors. So if we focus on risk and protective factors, we can prevent or reduce many risk behaviors at the same time. So this is the mantra of modern prevention. It's multi-risk behavior and focus on that, on risk and protective factors. Also, this is important. Sometimes I have feeling that we focus in prevention mostly on universal approaches, like going to schools, organizing some lectures for children or parents or workshops, whatever. But prevention is everywhere. In the whole spectrum of public health framework, we can find at least some important things relevant for prevention work. Also, when people are in recovery, they need some prevention interventions to keep going on the same direction, to empower them well, to give them some knowledge and skills to function well in life, to handle different crisis situations, etc. So prevention is everywhere. Wherever we see in this spectrum, we can find an opportunity for us to implement evidence-based prevention interventions. And spending, this is a critical point, I would like to say. Investment in prevention is very miserable. This is the data from OECD. I'm following this data already for the last 10, 15 years, and it does not change. The percentage is always around 3%. From health spending goes to prevention. And this is not all. There is a distribution of these expenses to different so-called, or let's say, prevention interventions. But what we are talking about today, it's only 27% of this 2.8%, so it's even more, it's even lower, much lower. So this is the fact. The large proportion of prevention spending is on less cost-effective measures, and we have to change this direction. We have to focus on cost-effective interventions. This is also always on my slides as well, because it shows a global situation in the field of prevention. And honestly speaking, we fail to improve the situation. Of course, there are good examples everywhere in the world with great success, with a lot of positive results and outcomes. But globally speaking, if we look at the global statistics in the field of drugs, alcohol, tobacco, other risk behaviors, we fail. And we leave behind next generations and the present generations every day. So we have to do better, and we can do better with more focusing on maybe some trends and some opportunities in the future. And Amy, this is a new statistics I found. So up to $400 for $1 spent, we can actually save. This is from the Washington State Institute for Public Policy, a registry of evidence-based practices rated by benefit-cost ratio. And the most effective cost-effective prevention interventions could save up to $400 for $1 spent. So this is a huge positive investment. And this document was mentioned already a few times today, the international standards in the field of prevention. Don't be shy. Who in this room actually read the document? You see? And it's one of the most important documents in the field of prevention. It actually collects the evidence from all over the world about what works, what doesn't work in prevention, and why. So all three areas are covered well in a structured way, very easily to follow and to read. It's structure based on the settings and developmental stages, so everybody can find for his or her own interventions if it's rated as an evidence-based intervention or not. If not, then we should do something to switch to more evidence-based practices. I don't have time to speak about ineffective approaches, but at least I would like to mention that there are still a lot of ineffective or harmful approaches all around the world, such as scare tactics, such as extract users in schools with testimonies, non-structured, non-interactive lectures and workshops, also in schools, and so on, one-off events like prevention days. All those are categorized by international standards as ineffective or harmful interventions. And we have to abandon them, not overnight, maybe it's difficult to do it overnight, but in a short period of time we have to abandon and switch to more evidence-based interventions. And there is a strong science behind. In the last 10 years, I would say that especially neuroscience gave us a lot of very quality knowledge about how brain develops, how brain function, which part of the brain are important for behavior control. It's this one, frontal lobe. So prefrontal cortex is responsible for behavior control, to see what is risky and what is not risky, what I should do or what shouldn't I do. And this part of the brain develops the last. So between 18 and 25 years old. So actually adults, young adults, are not really biologically capable to deal with some of the risky situations. So that's our responsibilities as adults to keep them safe and healthy through this important period of their life and brain development phases. And also, focusing on personal characteristics is also not a very good idea. This is also ineffective. We should focus more on environments such as family, school environment, community environment, workplaces, many more. So environments which are around us and influence strongly to our beliefs, attitudes, and behavior, the focus should be there in the next decades. Another issue I would like to highlight is when we usually enter prevention field. I would say too late, very late, mostly in adolescence when problems already appear. But what before? before adolescence, nobody see the problems, but if we would do more in early prevention stages, the outcomes and results in adulthood will be much, much better. So there is a concept of early prevention. This is quite new concept, mentioned already few times in the history, in literature, but it actually became a concept this year. And I'm proud that our institute was involved in this process in the last few years. And the CND resolution proposed by Slovenia, by our government, initiated by our institute, actually was adopted by Commission on Narcotic Drugs in March this year, and it is about promoting comprehensive and scientific evidence-based early prevention, which is a, I would say, important paradigm shift in prevention. And also people at the CND were a kind of surprised because we were using completely different terminology. No drug trafficking, no drugs, no, not usual terminology of CND, but completely different, like social and emotional competences, and so on. So that was quite a challenge also for national delegations to discuss and adopt this important document. And this document will be even more important in the future of our prevention work. And you see some very relevant studies showed how much would we save in numbers, in money, if we would focus more on childhood and early prevention to prevent or reduce adverse childhood experiences. So the numbers are huge. And usually with policy and decision makers, when we discuss with them about those topics, numbers count more than other issues. So we should bring those numbers to policy and decision makers because it matters a lot. Because they see, oh, we lost so much money in our budget and we should save it a little bit. So from this perspective, maybe it's a better advocacy strategy to keep showing them those numbers. And there is a lot of things we can do in early prevention. Read international prevention standards and you will find out about the approaches which are focused on early prevention and developmental stages before adolescence. And please invest and put more focus on those interventions. And the next concept, I was very surprised that prevention science actually discovered this concept very recently. It was published in the NASEM, in the National Academy of Science, Engineering and Medicine in 2020, in the book Promoting Positive Adolescent Health Behaviors and Outcomes, as one of the key concepts for the future of prevention, which means concept of optimal health. And when I started to think about this concept, I realized that actually the most focus in prevention nowadays is on physical health. Most of the things we do in prevention is about physical health. And we are not doing a lot about social and emotional health. Spiritual health, never heard about any evidence-based intervention focusing on spiritual health, but it's important, especially nowadays, in the days of crisis and war and migration crisis, energy crisis. We need a sense of purpose, love, hope, peace, etc. It's not the religious stuff, only religious background of this spiritual health, but also some other stuff which are young people are lacking today, and new generations are lacking today. And intellectual health as well as an important dimension of health. So in the next few decades, we have to focus or switch more from physical health and try to balance those dimensions of health in our prevention interventions. This is something, it's worth to mention. We don't need to be focused on 100% balance. This is not realistic. So, although all those 5 dimensions are equally important. And one more thing I want to highlight as well, you didn't see a mentioning of mental health or occupational health. When I discussed this with professionals in this field, they simply said that it's cross-cutting issue. You can find mental health or occupational health in all those 5 dimensions. So they are cross-cutting dimensions of health. So not necessary to make another category because they are actually in all of those 5 dimensions. And we have to focus on, to strive for balance under different circumstances. So many programs, many evidence-based interventions actually have focus on multiple optimal health domains, and we should implement them as much as possible. And also focus, I mentioned already, in different environments, so focus on different environments such as parents, family, peers, schools, neighborhoods, media. So all those environments have major influence on children, adolescents, and also on us adults. Yeah, the question is, do I still have enough time? Still, 10 minutes, okay, 5 minutes, good, thank you. Why we fail so often? This is a question I ask myself almost every day. And also my PhD thesis will be focused on this. This is something I would like to know, why we fail so often. Because we know that a lot of preventive interventions, although extensively researched and studied, have done little to reduce behavioral problems in children. We can see in statistics for different risk behaviors that we fail to make a breakthrough and significant changes in behavioral problems. This is one model which I like very much, a diffusion of innovations model, which is a very old model by Everett Rogers, 1962. So, smart guy. He knew already a long time ago why we fail in bringing innovations to life. And there are many good examples from which we can learn how to overcome this constant failures in bringing evidence-based prevention to daily life. And we most often fail in this very early stage to get early adopters. Many studies are pilot studies. They end up when money is finished, yes? And there is no continuation, no sustainability, no sustainable funding, no education and training to keep those interventions going and going and going. So this is where we fail most of the time in prevention. And we have to do something to build a bridge, or I don't know what we have to build here to overcome this and to come to early majority, and then it will become our daily practice, all those evidence-based interventions. So a few challenges for the future, and then I will leave some time for questions or discussion. So the first challenge we have is to invest in more evidence-based interventions and abandon slowly ineffective or abandon harmful interventions immediately. That's the challenge for all of us. And put more resources on early prevention and optimal health concepts. Education and training. Why the situation is like this in prevention is probably a lot due to lack of knowledge and skills in prevention workforce. So we have to continuously improve knowledge and skills and organize education and training on evidence-based prevention interventions such as universal prevention curriculum, European prevention curriculum. There are many tools, many options which we can use to increase knowledge and skills in prevention. Monitoring and evaluation, extremely important. How do you know your intervention is effective if you don't do the evaluation? And most of interventions are not evaluated. And we shouldn't say that those are good programs or good examples or best practices or good practices. If there is no evaluation, we don't know if they're effective. How would we know? Satisfaction of audience is not criteria for effectiveness. So people might be satisfied with intervention, but it doesn't mean anything. Of course, evidence-based interventions should be interesting as well and funny and so on. That's true. But satisfaction itself is not a guarantee that interventions are effective. We need to put more efforts on monitoring and evaluation and collaborate with universities, researchers. They could help us. It's not up to us, prevention grassroots professionals, to do all this evaluation and monitoring stuff. We have researchers and universities to help us with this. And they are probably willing to do that, especially if we can get some funding from the public sources. And the last thing is sustainable funding. So this is a critical issue for all of us, for our institute as well. We are now waiting for results of the call by the Ministry of Health, if they will give us enough funds for the next 3 years. So they promised they will publish the results on Friday, so I'm nervous at the moment. But I shouldn't be nervous, right? I should be sure that they will keep funding me for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But it doesn't happen. So this is a constant issue of us in the field of prevention. So that's it. I hope there are some questions. But don't kill the messenger. I mentioned I want to be your friend also after my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very powerful presentation. And I must appreciate your comment that prevention should go beyond, should reach out even to people who are in addiction so that we can look at relapse prevention. That's very exciting, and it's a discussion I'd really like to extend. I really appreciate the place of spirituality in what you have said, and you've brought it out very strongly. But we also need to identify and map out some harmful practices that spirituality brings in. For example, where violence is involved, maybe I can give an example in Kenya whereby people are beaten out so that the urge for drinking and using substances can go away, or where people are given very bitter herbs to take away the urge for drugs and substances. So spirituality is very keen, but we also need to come up as stakeholders and agree on what are the best practices in regards to spirituality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree, and a lot of prevention interventions focused on social and emotional competences and learning bring those issues to the agenda. So the purpose in life, love, solidarity, collaboration, so all those stuff are actually incorporated in some very evidence-based social and emotional learning interventions. And this is an important topic, of course, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matej. And I see Roger's waving behind me, so I'll say something quick and then hand over to him. It's so great to see you showcase how civil society can support governments and really to get this resolution through the CND and confirmed by the CND. So I would love to hear a little bit on how you did that, how you initiated the contact and this work together with the government. And I'm see if I'll hand over to Rogers as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you want comment from me, Regina?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Do we have time?
Okay. Thank you so much, Matej, for your presentation. I'm looking at the theme of this conference, of this forum, Children Matter. And I want to appreciate that you have been discussing prevention and what works, what we need to improve, and what we need to do better. Where do you place children in the context of prevention? In other words, I'm beginning to think that if we are going to help children, the children themselves have a role to play somewhere, somehow, in order to make our interventions solid or have an impact, even improving efficacy and benefit more from this. So from a scholarly point of view, where do you place children? Are you leaving children outside or you are bringing them in? Because children matter. Children matter. Where do we place them? Thank you.
Yeah, that's not really difficult question, but you know, if we implement evidence-based interventions which are parental interventions or family-based interventions, the most effective interventions include children in the interventions. They are not separate like workshop for parents, but the most effective evidence-based interventions for families include children equally as parents. For example, you have parents sessions, children's sessions, and you bring them together as a third part of the session. So they should be included in interventions. But also when you focus on schools, for example, usually you don't speak about drugs and alcohol with very young children. So the most effective approaches are to bring the topics such as social skills, social and emotional learning, classroom management interventions, which have better outcome at the end also. Longitudinal studies show that, for example, classroom management approaches and interventions could really make a difference in adulthood. Like I would like to mention just one intervention, which is classic good behavior game. It's for very early school children, 6 to 8 years old, and the classroom management is the main method of doing things. It doesn't have anything with drugs and alcohol, just to manage the classroom behavior in a better way. So not necessarily really to highlight the drugs and alcohol and substances and different risk behaviors when we work with children in prevention field. So we use different approaches, not just drug education. Regina, yeah, this is a difficult question. Yeah. We actually initiated this in one discussion at CND a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, with our delegation at CND, that it would be great that Slovenia would file a resolution in the field of prevention. We were not speaking about early prevention at that time yet. But when obviously it was the right time, because the topic went higher on the agenda. Also, our institute developed in that time. So we realized what are should be the main focuses in the future of prevention. And we found actually very small amount of literature or evidence on early prevention. It's more in crime prevention, it's more on other fields. Early prevention is more studied and researched, but not in substance use prevention. So this is something, we call it a gray market, so something which is still developing or is very little knowledge and skills. And we found out that this is probably one of the most important paradigm shifts in prevention for the future. To switch on early developmental stages to get better results, because we can reduce, we can prevent in adolescence, but not to that large extent. Our outcomes are very minimum, and we are not satisfied with them. So we want to do more. So we want to start earlier. That's the message. Lunchtime. So I'm here all 3 days, so no worries, you can ask later.
Thank you, Mr. Matej. We are now breaking for lunch. We have an hour break. I'd just like to bring to your attention a desk just outside the entrance. We have, in Project Vendor, we use football as an effective tool to help children steer clear from substance abuse. So we have an annual football tournament where children from vulnerable areas, marginalized children, get an opportunity to play the real game in a very professional way. So we have this small kiosk there that offers you an opportunity to sponsor a kit for a child, and in return you get a nice t-shirt, one of our favorite t-shirts that is a Fair Play t-shirt we have there, and some other merchandise of the conference. So please do take some time and look through these stalls. And we also have the standees where the real life stories of children, which I mentioned before, resonate with the children across the world. So please take time to look through these stories and visit our merchandise desk as well. So we break for lunch now, and we come back at 2 p.m. and we have the official inaugural ceremony at 2 p.m. So please do try and come back at least 5 minutes before the ceremony, before the commencement of the ceremony. So thank you. We'll break for lunch now.